I am so excited about the future, and I'm just like grateful that I live in this time and age, right? Of like I get to see the world develop at such a rapid pace now, and I'm super pumped to be here.
Welcome back to This Week in No Code. I am JJ, your co-host, and I'm here with my co-host, David Pal. David, welcome back.
Buenos dias from Buenos Aires.
We are happy to have you back with us today, David. As you can
Glad to be here.
imagine, audience, we have another really exciting show for you this time. Last week, we had a fantastic talk with David, the CEO of Glide. If you haven't checked out that episode yet, please do. I think it's one of our best from the feedback so far. So definitely
Mhm.
go and check that out. But for this episode, we have so much for you. Of course, we're going to hit on the OpenAI drama because my God,
Yeah.
is that juicy. But we're also going to talk about a lot of new tools and some other controversy that is hitting the tech atmosphere or the tech ecosystem with TLDRAW, AppSumo controversy, Notion AI. And then we'll also get into our guest of the day, who is Marius, one of the managing directors at Techstars Seattle. He is a previous entrepreneur with a large exit. We're going to hear about his story and then also his role at Techstars Seattle, what he looks for in companies when he's looking to invest in them, what he thinks about no code, where he thinks no code and AI are going, and so much more. Without any further ado, let's get into the no code news of this week with David.
All right. Happy to be back. Excited to dive into some of the juicy drama a little bit. It was odd to be away during that. Well, let's get a start with TLDRAW, formerly a whiteboarding tool, TLDRDraw.com, became TLDRAW.ai. Basically, what they've done is they've said, hey, you're drawing stuff on our whiteboard. What if we can turn these whiteboard drawings into actual websites? And so they've actually integrated this UI builder drawer kind of process and made it into a real real HTML, let's say, using OpenAI integration. And so you can see in this video, people are just drawing, annotating, giving directions, and asking for updated creations, and it produces this HTML. Really cool feature. Let's also remember that you have to then do something with this HTML, right? You can't just like, great, I have a website. Everyone go to tldraw.com and see my site. This is this is a cool little feature. I love these little explorations into AI. Although I will say there's an article that if you search for no code or not no code, AI builds websites,
hmm
you'll find an NVIDIA post from 2018, like 5 years ago, saying AI can now build websites. So, like it's all coming full circle. Obviously, it's now a lot easier with Chat GPT to do a lot of these things. GPT V, I guess, is probably what makes it easiest with V, but it's still really fun to play with more than it is actually something I look forward to in production.
Yeah, I think it's something like right, like it's pretty magical to see it happening. But you're right, it's just HTML. Then you need to do a lot with it to really connect that. You need to stage it, host it, all that kind of stuff. Like there's so much more to it than just that. But I think it just shows that we're moving quickly. Things are literally coming to life now, and it's really exciting. And this is kind of like one of those steps.
Could be interesting to see how, this can be used as like an education component. If I want to learn how to write HTML, I can draw what I'm thinking and I can see it get created and then look at the code and go, oh, this is how I might do that. And then you kind of learn a little bit more, right? And then ask Chat GPT, take the code, drop it in, and say, can you explain this to me? Is actually a kind of neat exploration into this.
Yeah,
Uh, I don't think that's what they were aiming for. They were hoping for some virality, which a
I
top
got.
article, and so it definitely got some notice. But we'll see if they ever do anything more with this.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Let's move on to our next one with AppSumo. So this last week, one of our bubble builders, he tried to submit his bubble application built on AppSumo, right? AppSumo is a platform where you can like offer a discount to the masses, almost like a Groupon, but for software, right?
Yeah.
And immediately he was rejected, saying, sorry, we don't accept apps that have been built on Bubble. Just like an automatic reject. And he posted on Twitter. And that's kind of when I saw it and said some things to the CEO and to my community, my audience. He's essentially saying, like, what's going on here? Like, this
Yeah,
is
why?
crazy, right? And the CEO responded, apologizing for the inconvenience, but ultimately said that Bubble Apps affects their customer satisfaction and that their customers have asked for this not to happen. And there was a lot of backlash. There's like, I think, what I went out and said is that this creates prejudice of like your tech stack, and your tech stack is not good enough and no better than the others. And so, no matter if it's a good app or a bad app, we're just going to reject you right away. And I have checked out the app myself. It's a really great app. It's really well done. I actually worked with the creator to help kind of put it out to my audience, just say, hey, because that didn't work out, let's try it here. But I think generally just pulling it back, like companies denying apps across the board based on a tech stack, and you can make the case that like Shopify is a tech stack. Like there's so many different tech stacks. It just doesn't make sense that they're picking Bubble and some of these other ones to do it to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the history of AppSumo rejecting bubble apps. I can imagine that like a lot of people putting out things on AppSumo made it's easier to get something to MVP that's not great but kind of working onto AppSumo, and you offer a lifetime deal, and then 3 months later you're gone. I could see how that's a bad experience. I can see how it's maybe easier to write bad apps with Bubble than with code. I don't know. Like, I mean, it seems like a stretch of the imagination that like one necessarily leads to the other. Right? Like, you
Yeah.
can write bad apps with code too,
Yeah.
right? I do think it does make sense to do some checking, right?
Hmm.
Like if I was AppSumo, I'd say, oh, this is built on Bubble. Let me verify this. Let me ask some more questions,
Hmm.
not just auto reject.
Hmm.
Most marketplaces have this problem. I tried to buy an app on MicroAcquire,
Okay.
and the guy, who said he had all this revenue and had all these statistics of all these page views, he had actually just like bought a template and reskinned it and said, "Oh, this is mine. I wrote this. I built this," but kind of didn't really.
Hmm.
And so when I went in to like figure out how it was actually working, it was, you couldn't really do anything with it because it was built with this template.
Hmm.
And so maybe there were some templates that were being sold, or I don't know.
What I would say, one is that this is a very outdated way of thinking, just to be able to auto reject. And they said it's based on quantity, and they can't check them all, and they need to make sure it meets their quality. And I respect that, right? You need to make sure it hits your quality satisfaction. Sure. But just rejecting apps across the board without actually looking at it seems to me more like your systems are outdated, and you need a better way to like actually find quality things for your members that you're
Yeah.
not doing. And also, like, as a platform, they rely on these creators in order to give these products to their audience. And so you would think that they would support their creators because and in fact they don't. They're actually only really catering to the people buying and kind of pushing their creators aside seemingly. So I don't like any of that, but I understand also that like I think generally with no code apps, Bubble included, that we can build faster, and it's mostly first time builders building. And so the quality that they might be pushing to places like AppSumo might just not be there because it's their first time building an app. And so I could see that like stereotype coming along, right? Whereas compared to like, I built this on a traditional stack. It takes, programmers that have been doing this for a while in order to bring this stack together. And so it's just better tested because of such. So I could see that playing out, but I don't know. I just didn't love seeing it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like they weren't able to make a line to help filter things out. So they took it, right? Like you can't just say, oh, a poorly coded app shouldn't make it onto the site. That's true, right? They shouldn't allow any bad apps on their site,
Yeah.
but they just can't tell a poorly coded app from a good app without like some other test. But with Bubble, they can say, we've had experiences where people have built bad apps with Bubble, so we'll just filter.
Yeah.
And that goes to show like this is totally true as a stereotype of Bubble. Not that they build bad apps, but like think about how many comments get made that nobody builds pretty apps on Bubble. And that just goes to show that like we all, when we launch things as a Bubble community, no code community, we are representing everyone else in the industry and we should be striving to do our best so that these things don't happen.
Yeah. I think that's totally it. I think it's a new technology and, their main persona is entrepreneurs building for the first time. Entrepreneurs see this opportunity. They finally build something. They submit something that just isn't there. And eventually they're just like, we're just going to reject it all. Unfortunately, as sad as
Yeah.
it is. Anyways, I think we can move on to the next thing.
We've talked about Notion before. Notion is a productivity tool, kind of a blank canvas editing notebook automation system, empowers a lot of teams to collaborate in a lot of interesting ways. They've added some AI tools for assistance and writing, making it easier to fill out in these pages that they have. And also it helps to avoid the blank page problem, kind of starting from scratch. But now, actually, they've also added a bunch of other tools in the data side of things, making it easier to add columns, autofill tools, process data, offer summaries. There's a lot of stuff that they're doing in here, really to just expand on what you can do, make this collaboration even faster, give people more power. And what we saw with Glide last week is an empowering businesses to have better outcomes and do more with less. And so we're seeing that a lot here.
Yeah, I think, we previously discussed that Coda did this, I think, like last
Mhm.
month. And I
Yeah.
think now Notion is following up. Essentially, it's just a way to like ask your docs questions. What is the content
Yeah.
of this docs? Or can you help me write new stuff here? A better way to interact with your docs, which is a home run. I think this is a well needed use case of AI. And I think this is a no brainer, really. I'm excited to see kind of where they could take it next because I think this was like the low hanging fruit and they're kind of just following suit with Coda. But it's a good step for Notion. It's a great productivity tool. It's used by a lot of people, and so this might be the first step to AI for those people that are using it. And I think that could be a good thing too. But generally, I think Notion is doing a good work here. Love to see them adding more tools like this into the editor and give it a try, I suppose.
Yeah. Fair.
All right, let's move on to the OpenAI stuff. And so we have a lot of information. We are not breaking any news here. We're going to try and just summarize a little bit and just offer our recap, but we're not going to get into this whole thing because it's honestly crazy. It's like I have been hooked to this, and it's the first time I've actually been hooked to like tech news, I think, in my life. And I think that's because like I see the power of ChatGPT and all that it can do. And then all of a sudden, what was it? Thursday night saying that, Sam received a message from one of his board members. And then was it Friday? He was dismissed
Yeah.
and he was fired from OpenAI. And news got out and we're like, how can like three people on a board just get rid of this most famous and powerful CEO right now, right? Like, how
Yeah.
can this happen, right? And everything that came out was just like people just vouching for Sam, but we didn't know any of the truth. OpenAI went to then add their CTO, Mira, as like their interim CEO. Microsoft, who is a major investor in OpenAI, they own up to like 49%, actually found out about Sam's firing like minutes before the public announcement. So you're like, what the heck there? And then
Yeah.
Greg, one of the co-founders of OpenAI, was being removed from the board. And so he ended up just resigning in support of Sam. And everything just exploded. And Sam just expressed gratitude on Twitter about it and suggests stuff for his future plan. And then all of a sudden, this OpenAI letter appears of like the OpenAI staff showing symbolic support for Sam. And they end
Basically
up giving him
everyone. Like the
just
all of the 700 almost all of them.
almost all of the 700 employees who do
Yeah.
it. And coming from some of the employees now, we're actually hearing that some of those employees felt pressured because some of the original employees were like messaging them like to do this because they had so many shares in the company and so much to lose here. And there was
Oh,
kind of
for
like a
sure.
pressure cooker pressuring these newer people to sign on board there because they still believe that Sam was the best for this company that was almost seemingly disappearing overnight, right? And so everyone was just like, okay, well, if you don't bring Sam back, we're all gonna walk. And then Sunday night, Satya, the CEO of Microsoft, announced that Sam and Greg and anyone else that wanted was going to join Microsoft and form a new division there, which was like, okay, well, I guess everyone is going to leave OpenAI and Microsoft is just going to buy OpenAI and put
Yeah.
Sam back. And we're like,
Yeah.
okay, what's going on there? And then what was it? Monday morning? Was it Monday morning or this morning? Tuesday morning?
I think it was yeah, it may have
Or
been yesterday or this morning
yeah.
officially.
So they quickly, I think on Sunday night, Monday, and Tuesday, they got another CEO, Emmett Shear, who was a previous co-founder of Twitch. He joined the
Yeah.
company for like 2 days. He was
I
supposedly
wonder
like,
if he got any vesting shares for that or like a signing.
like supposedly when he called like an all hands, people responded with like emojis to the all hands with like the FU symbols of like people
Wow.
were like totally not about it, right?
Yeah.
This has been a crazy. And so eventually, I think it was Tuesday going on Wednesday morning, the news announced that Sam rejoined OpenAI and then they were redoing the board and all the structure for that. And so this 5-day saga of Sam getting fired, nearly the whole company leaving, because 3 people essentially on their board decided so. And
Yeah.
then those 3 people have then, I think, been removed, and now Sam is back, and they are getting back to work. And so the real thing of this is like, what is this all about, right? Like, there's speculation that, Sam and Greg over the years, they haven't been some of the kindest employers. That's speculation. There's rumors. There's also speculation that Sam has been doing like a side hustle of trying to raise money for like a hardware company, knowing that he's going to need a lot of hardware in like an AGI world. There's also speculation of they had an AGI breakthrough and that internally there was a power struggle of like, and what are we gonna do with this? And, like, that all folded before they could
Yeah.
do anything with it as, like, a power struggle. So, there's a lot that we still don't know about this, but I think when an $80 billion company that has the latest AI technology that is really changing everything goes crazy like this, it's worrisome.
Yeah. It wonders how, lots of lives are hinging on the success or failure of this. Like, think about all of the startups that are built as open AI wrappers, right? Like,
Yeah, not only
that
that,
exist.
Microsoft lost, like, $50 billion of market cap over the
And
weekend when Sam, like, left and then joined, and then they raised and, like, it's really
yeah,
affecting them, and then the 700 employees.
all of them who, on as of Saturday had lost half their net worth.
Right,
Like all
exactly,
tied up. Yeah.
and then, like, the CEO of Salesforce is trying to poach all these OpenAI employees that took
Yeah.
and so, like, they're losing a lot of people, and so it's like, they just kinda, like, kidney gutted, like, punched themselves from internally.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's interesting. Some articles are kind of like, saying that we should have seen this coming on both like the structure of OpenAI as a nonprofit and a for-profit and Sam's role and shares. Like it's so unconventional, at
Yeah,
least to think like this being done. It also didn't seem like the board that was there was very experienced in being
right.
a board.
Right. That's what my thought, at
Yeah.
least, but it's hard because we're still learning more information about it.
Yeah.
Still stuff's coming out, but it seemed like a very rookie move, right?
Yeah.
Not even to notify Microsoft, your biggest shareholder, of like, "Hey, we need your advice. We're gonna do this. What's the plan? How do we do this?" Right? Like,
And like some of the people involved, I mean, like it's come out that or who knows what's like actually the real truth versus what we've heard. They say Ilya helped to orchestrate this, but like Ilya was the officiant at Greg's wedding in the open AI offices. Like, how do you turn your back on someone like that and really just say, yeah, screw it. I'm nervous about this. I don't trust you anymore. How do
right.
you go back? Like now that he's back as CEO, how does Ilya continue?
I don't know. This is weird. I think it's worrisome. I mean, like, obviously this is whatever, but it makes you think like if humans should be responsible for something like this, like that if it might not be better overseen by AI, something like that. Because we
Yeah.
get so emotional with this stuff, and like obviously that's a big statement. It's half of a joke, but this is a very big and powerful company that has the potential to literally change lives and
Yeah.
change generations. That had three people silently pulling strings behind it that just created a lot of corruption.
Yeah. Although I wonder, like, I guess they weren't pulling the strings at least as much as they wanted to, which is why they had to fire Sam. Because if they could actually pull the strings,
Yeah,
they whatever they were upset about, they could have changed, but they
right.
couldn't change because they had no control.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know what else is like, we, the public, by showing the amount of support that we did for Sam, kind of made him invincible going forward,
Mhm.
right? Like,
Yeah,
now has unlimited power because
he
of
could do
all
no
of this.
wrong.
He could
Yeah,
do no wrong, and now he's in a position with potential AGI and all this AI and resources behind him to really do some shit, right? And so, I hope we didn't all bite ourselves in the butt there or whatever, like, everything shows that this is a great person, and we're lucky to have him in our, society for pushing this innovation, but I
yeah,
think this story, there's still a lot left to be told, and it's a little scary how much, just a handful of people can do with power like this.
yeah. But what's exciting is it does really kinda show that, you know, AI innovations are happening with people,
Mhm.
and people are involved, and that as long as people are involved, you'll continue to get better results. It's not just like this automated system of computers doing everything. There are people behind things.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think that's pretty great. It has been wild to me how pervasive the news has been, right? Like every headline, every article, every newspaper has something about this, even if they're not normally covering AI or tech or news, they're still covering this really intensely. It's like the best drama, high stakes, global, tech, people, regulation, safety. It's just so entertaining.
I completely agree. Here we are with Marius. He is a managing director at Techstars Seattle, but he didn't always be that. He was also an entrepreneur coming up in the film industry with his last startup. Marius, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe a little bit about ShareGrid and how you might have gotten to where you are right now?
Yeah, sure. So I started off as a filmmaker. I went to film school, mostly focused on um, editing side, visual effects, 3D animation. And later on, throughout college, I had a startup. After college, I had a startup. I kept gravitating towards tech, and designing iPhone apps was the thing I really enjoyed doing. And that led me to get a job at Groupon as one of the first designers on the mobile team. So I had the opportunity to design the first ever Groupon app, and that was a wild
Right.
ride and learned a lot doing that. And later on, spent about 3 years at Groupon, met my co-founder, which would end up being my co-founder for ShareGrid. ShareGrid was a startup that we started in about 2015. It was a marketplace for filmmakers and photographers to rent out their equipment to other filmmakers and photographers. And we started out 2015, ran it until 2021 when we sold it to a large company called Backstage. They've been around since the 60s in the film industry. So ShareGrid's still going. It's one of the largest marketplaces for equipment, over $1 billion worth of equipment on the platform. And the whole team is still there. I'm the only one that has left, and got an angel investing right after, and had the opportunity to join Techstars Seattle as a managing director, and seemed like a great idea at the time. So, and I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, I gotta say, ShareGrid, there was a lot that went into that. Like you had a $50 to $60,000 camera, and then you just wanted to like rent that out to someone else for the day for like $500, right? All the insurance, the liability, like all that stuff of like a stranger, almost like Airbnb, right? A
Mhm.
stranger saying, here is a $60,000 lens, take it and do not drop it. And if you do, I'm gonna call Marius and then talk about it. There was a lot that you had to figure out in that startup. You guys, I came from the film industry too. You guys became the company, the gear sharing company, very similar to the Airbnb of the industry, and you did a lot of things really well there. talk about scaling. Like, how did you like get that chicken and egg problem solved? Like, so many of us struggle with that chicken and egg problem when building
Lots of marketplaces.
marketplaces. Like,
Mhm.
how did you guys go about that?
So many things come to mind, and a lot of it was manual, as you imagine. So, a few things I'll mention. When we were starting off, first off, we just read the Lean Startup, the book, and it really inspired us to not build anything right away. Right. So, we built a landing page just to prove out the idea. And on that landing page, we kind of just put our vision on the page. Hey, this is going to be a marketplace. You'll make hundreds, thousands of dollars every month. Everything will be fully insured. Sign up. Right. And none of that was figured out. None of it was built. We wanted to see if people would gravitate towards the idea before we dedicated a lot of time. We were still working our day jobs, and this was nights and weekends that we built this landing page. And we threw a few $100s at Facebook when Facebook advertising was very cheap.
That
Um,
actually resulted in some views.
Yeah, so within a few weeks, we had over 2,000 signups for this wait list, and
Wow.
we were super excited. But what was more exciting was people were emailing us, literally like spreadsheets full of equipment, saying, "Here's my equipment. When can I get started?"
Wow.
So we saw the eagerness and the idea right away, and that got us really excited to keep building. And we knew that it wasn't actually the marketplace that was necessarily the innovation here, right? Marketplaces have been done many times. So we actually started with a open source code base that we just built on top of. So we just took an MIT free license code base and started building from that. We didn't build every feature of the marketplace. Well, we did end up where we deviated from the lean startup was the lean startup advised move fast, ship often, get out there as quickly as possible. And I think our competitor probably read the same book because they shipped before us. That was hard for us to see that people were starting to sign up for their service and we haven't launched yet. And the reason we didn't launch is because we knew coming from the industry how important it was to how important trust was in this community because like JJ said, you're renting out a $60,000 camera. You really hope that thing doesn't get dropped and it doesn't get stolen. And if it were to get dropped or stolen, you would be 100% covered. So we decided to look for an insurance partner. And once we found an insurance partner, they said, you need to build an entire insurance platform online because we don't have. So that's where we spent over 6 months actually hiring engineers to build that platform. And we delayed our launch for over 6 months because we felt like that was super important. And once we did launch, we were able to get press about that. And the main key thing the press spoke about was the insurance piece because they obviously knew their audience and knew that they would care about that. And that press got us a huge amount of signups. So that's one thing. The other way we battled the chicken and egg problem was when you signed up for ShareGrid, it was private community. Again, we understood that trust was such a big thing. So we said, it's invite only. We're only going to invite professionals. And once you're in, you get 3 invite codes. Please only invite people that you trust. Realistically, we were hoping we would invite anyone because
Yeah.
if I would invite 3 people and those people would invite 3 people, we would have a viral loop on our hands. So it was a little bit of a ploy, but it worked because people were starting to look for these invite codes and they felt like there was a little
Mm,
bit of FOMO building up. And once they signed up, we would not even let them go into the marketplace because we said, hey, if they show up and the store is empty, who would like to come back to an empty storefront? Like,
Right.
that's not a good experience. So we said, hey, if you would like to be considered to be part of the community, go ahead and submit a list of your equipment. They would
Uh,
submit their
oh,
equipment. And then we would like by hand list all of their equipment for them. So then we would go out and find photos for every single piece of gear, descriptions, titles. We would price it for them. And
wow.
then we launched the community. All you had to do was just reset the password and your profile was completely filled out. Your avatar image, we took it from your portfolio. We
yeah.
took your
Mm.
description. Everything was completely filled out. So we tried to reduce friction as much as possible. And that's how we got the supply first because we knew we had to have the supply. Otherwise, the demand would never come. And the supply was easy because all you had to do is send us a list. And then it was off your hands. You wouldn't have to think about it until we emailed you again. So there was you weren't losing anything by having your equipment on the platform.
And
You
it was
were,
just one market.
yeah, exactly.
That's
And
nice.
we started with just one city. We started in Los
Yeah.
Angeles first.
Yeah.
And that's it feels like the unscalable thing first, right? That's what Airbnb pushes this because it sounds like Airbnb, right? The early days of Airbnb, they sent the professional photographer to the apartment
Mhm.
to make it look professional, like somewhere you'd actually want to live. And so you went through and made sure all of these things are filled out and
Yeah.
full and complete. So everyone's experience just felt like a white glove
When you,
service.
when you logged on, and then we didn't open it up until we had enough equipment on there so that when you walked into the marketplace, you were like, whoa, first off, I know all of these people. They're in my city. I've worked with this person. I've worked with this
Yeah.
person. This is the real deal. Oh, and they have 3 of the red cameras and they have
For
4
a
of the,
more affordable price.
and the price. Oh, so the other trick we
Yeah.
did there.
Yeah.
So we uploaded everybody's gear and then we said, hey, in order for us to get things going, because the price we used was essentially the only reference point we had was rental houses. Rental houses obviously have a markup on all of their prices because they have a huge infrastructure. So we said, in order for us to get going, we're going to apply a 20% discount across the entire community. We're going to lower all prices by 20%. And some people
Mm.
are like, what do you mean? Like, how are you doing this? And we said, no, if you don't like it, you could go in and just change the price. Nobody
Uh,
went in to change their price for 10, 20 items.
Yeah.
right.
Instantly. So we knew that like the friction would work against them and they would never
Yes.
change their price. So for the first 3 months, we lowered the price to 20%. And then we said, hey, any new equipment you list, we're not going to lower the price anymore. But if you want to change all of your listings, you can always increase the price. But nobody did because they wanted to compete against it.
Huh.
Yeah. So on my side, I came from the film producing side, and one of my cinematographers was like, "We're on a budget shoot," and they're like, "Hey, I really want this lens. Check out this site. They got it for like the cheapest I've seen." And it was ShareGrid, and I went and checked it out as like a producer, and I was like, "Okay, I'm going to submit my insurance here." They built the insurance portal just like you'd interact with any kind of other vendor. So as like a producer, I was like, "All right, here's my certificate of insurance. Here's my credit card. I just booked it, and here's your lens. Here you go." And then it was just like, okay, this is convenient and easy and like everything seems to be there. And then it became the thing and really proud of what he grew it to because it grew very, very big beyond that. But like this is a weird industry. Like this film industry, it's very old in a lot of ways. They were refusing to adapt to technology in many ways, right? You had one way of doing it, and it's like, this is my camera guide, this is my lighting house, this is my whatever. And so creating new norms like this, like ShareGrid was doing, was really hard to do, and I think you guys did a great job with it, obviously.
Yeah, that was tough to battle against as these existing behaviors that were so tough to change. And honestly, we didn't try to. Like, we didn't even try to change people's minds because we knew there was a segment of the population that was willing to adapt. The
Mhm.
younger filmmakers that were just entering the space, they were much more tech savvy. They're willing to try new things. But the people that have been in the industry for a while, it took us years to gain their trust and be able to get them on the platform. Actually, funny enough, COVID was huge for us because rental houses, first of all, hated us. These are the traditional brick and mortar warehouses
Yeah,
full
you're
of
the disruptor.
Yeah.
we were the disruptor in many ways. And the most disrupting feature of our entire marketplace was the fact that we showed prices. Because
Oh,
anytime before that, when you would work with a rental house, you would have to call and ask them, hey, how much for an Alexa Mini? And they would ask you, what are you working on?
Yeah, what's your budget? What do you got? And everything was a negotiation, right?
price
Yeah.
would change.
Yeah.
Yeah. And our prices were upfront. You could see. And some people would not even shop from, they would not even rep from us, but they would just come in and see what the price is, what the market price was. So
Mhm.
even though their clients would still shop with them, our website would still impact their business. They did not want to work with us until COVID. When the entire industry shut down, we said, what do we do? 98% of our rentals went away. So we said the only thing we have in our control is let's increase our supply. Everybody's sitting on their hands right now. So we contacted every rental house and they said, yeah, let's give it a try. I mean, we're not doing anything. So they started loading up our website with the most equipment we could ever see. And every time a new piece of equipment landed on our website, the network effect of our marketplace increased. And what I mean by that is every time you add another Alexa Mini, what happens is you have a lot more selection. So the value for the renter goes up because now I don't have to drive an hour to get on Alexa. There's one right in my neighborhood. The value of Sharebird goes up. And the second thing is every time you add a piece of equipment, you create competition. So now if there's 10 Alexa minis, you want to lower your price just a little bit to be able to stand out, which creates a lot more value again on the demand side. So
Mhm.
COVID was in a way a blessing in disguise because we were able to load up our inventory. So when production came back, we had the most selection and the best pricing yet again.
Oh, it's interesting to hear, I guess, the supply demand decision, or which side to go after. I guess you have to pick one. There's always, in a supply and demand world, there's always one that's more patient,
Mhm.
right? Usually it's the supply side because this is extra for them. And the
Mhm.
demand side is always the one that's like impatient. And so a lot of marketplaces will launch really early. And we see lots of marketplaces in the no code world
Yeah.
really early going like, it's an empty marketplace. We'll launch it. Someone will like it, right? They won't go and try build up that demand or build up the supply so that when the demand arrives, it's a good experience for them.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
really good
Yeah.
insight.
It becomes really challenging, like you mentioned, when the supply is not patient or when the supply, there's a lot asked of the supply. There's a lot of energy that the supply side needs to input. One example might be a course website or a marketplace of teachers, right? Like Teachable or Masterclass. Because now you're asking somebody, hey, would you dedicate hours to build a course? And they're going to ask, okay, what am I getting in return? Do you have the demand? Show me the numbers before I put in all of this energy. So in that case, you might want to flip it. You might want to advertise the supply before the course has even been built,
Mhm.
get the demand, get a wait list going. So then you go to the supply side and say, look, there's thousands of people waiting to purchase your course. It's worth putting in all that energy. But if your
Yeah.
supply side is really patient, it requires no energy on their side, then you could start with the supply side.
Yeah, we saw so I came from the ad tech world, and we saw that in outdoor billboards. In order to get a billboard network onto a marketplace, they had to spend a ton of time trying
Mm,
to standardize their metrics, trying to input the data, trying to get everything in there, their systems hooked up, the tech talking together. And the biggest question was always, well, how much demand am I going to get for all of this effort? And so
yeah,
they were really impatient. They would, expect millions of dollars to just magically appear. And
yeah,
so a lot of the time, what we ended up seeing, there are a couple early movers in the space that did well, but a lot of the others actually started by being their own supply,
mhm,
right? They have their own network of properties, like a course maker. I already have 100 courses that I'm selling that I produce myself. I have
yeah,
all of these people coming to me anyway. Let me allow other people to co-sell at the same
yeah,
time.
yeah,
So that marketplace, the supply driven or the supply impatient usually starts with if you owned $1 billion worth of rental equipment and you were trying to sell it that way,
yeah,
then you add on more after,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's not fortunately
So
in the
yeah,
United
yeah,
States, didn't have
well,
a but I don't think I don't think that's what it was.
exactly.
That's
Yeah,
really
so you went on to run that company for what, 8 years. You were CEO, co-founder, or something like that?
Yep. I started off. I did not start off as CEO. My co-founder Arash was CEO in the early days when
Okay,
we went out to fundraise. He previously had a startup and he sold it to Groupon. So we felt like he was much more experienced and that would play really well with investors. And within maybe a year and a half, 2 years, we switched roles and I became CEO and he moved to the product side, became CTO.
cool, cool. And then you ended up selling that company to a larger company, and now you're at your role at Techstars as a managing director in Seattle. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is, what that role is, and what program you offer?
Yeah. So Techstars as a whole, so there's Techstars Central, and Techstars as a organization is the largest seed investor in the world. So we do over 700 investments a year. And then the way we're split up, unlike other, so we're an investment accelerator. And unlike other accelerators, probably the most popular one would be Y Combinator. Y Combinator is based in one city, right? We're actually based in 57 different areas around the globe. So we have offices in New York and Boulder and Seattle and Los Angeles and Austin and Tokyo and Berlin, right? All over the place. And I particularly run the Seattle office. So Techstars Seattle has actually been around for more than a decade. It's actually the third oldest program in within all the 57 different programs. The Techstars started in Boulder, then it moved to New York, then Seattle. And because we've been around for a long time, we've had amongst the highest returns of all the programs. And a lot of it has to do because we've been able to see the companies grow and we've had, they've had time to mature, right? So we have three unicorns that have come out of the Seattle program. So Remitly, which is a publicly traded
Mm.
company, Outreach, and Zipline. So that was, and then hopefully many more that are like really, really well. So that's one thing that attracted me to the program is that the Seattle program particularly has had a lot of success. But the way the program works is that we'll invest up to $120,000 and we'll invest in about 24 companies a year. Once we make that investment, then we have the company go through a 3 month extensive, let's call it a boot camp, right? So they come to our offices, we give them office space, and then for 3 months, they essentially do the work that you would typically do within 2 years, but you do it within 3 months. So we help you from anywhere to, we partner you with mentors. We bring in a lot of different mentors from different areas. Most of them have been founders themselves. Some of them are industry experts in marketing or SEO or
No
sales.
code.
And we'll bring in mentors. We'll match you up with mentors, and then we'll help you figure out who your customer is, how to actually gain traction, and then ultimately we'll help you with your fundraise. So we'll introduce you to hundreds of investors, help you develop your pitch deck, your data room, everything you need to be investor ready. And then of course we have demo day at the end of the 3 months.
And that's for a seed stage company, right?
Exactly. So we invest at the pre-seed and seed stage. Out of the group that that's going through the program as we speak, out of the 24 companies, about 40% of them have raised friends and angel round, but some of them haven't raised at all. And it's just an idea. And yeah, well, it's that early stage that we're interested in. And we'll only invest in this mostly all software companies. We won't invest in life science or hardware.
Mm.
Okay. And so what is the difference between a pre-seed and a seed for our audience?
Yeah. So pre-seed is essentially is just comes before seed. Pre-seed, typically we see rounds anywhere from 500,000 to a million. And then seed now is anywhere from million to 2 or 2.5 million. And it's always changing. And it's,
Yeah.
when I was raising a seed round was anywhere from 500,000 to a
Yeah.
million. Now it keeps going up. Series A used to be like $2, $3 million. So it keeps adjusting all the time, but there's a lot of good data on carta.com. If you go there, there's a bunch of reports and you'll be able to understand that. But pre-seed, we typically, it's okay to just have an idea and some validation of the customer. At the seed level, we're probably going to want to see some customers and see some traction, some growth. And then series A, you want to see revenues.
Yeah. Can you, this is a very specific question, but only because we talked about the ranges on the seed side. Lots of people have this idea that raise as much money as you can whenever you can, right? Go get the 5 million if you can go get 5 million. If you were a founder listening in, how would you decide how much money you need?
Yeah. So the way you decide how much money you need is you need to be able to reach your next milestone. So if you're if you're raising a pre-seed, you want to make sure that you have enough time to reach whatever milestone you have in mind to reach your seed. And there's different milestones for different types of companies, right? If you're a hardcore deep tech, it might be developing the actual technology that you need, might be the next step. If you're a social network, it might be that you need a couple 100,000 users or some kind of retention number that you need to hit, right? So you don't necessarily, a lot of advice I see is you need to raise for 18 months. Yes, that's a good start, but you need to raise for your next milestone, because the worst thing you want to do is you raise for 18 months, but you don't reach your milestone that you need to be able to raise your Series A, let's say. So
That's right.
I'll give you an example. In most cases, for a Series A, you're going to need to do 500,000 to $1 million or above in recurring revenue a year. So let's say that you only reach 300,000. Well, now you're going to be really stuck because you can't raise your Series A. So you might have to raise a C plus, which is really looked down upon. You essentially missed your target, and or you might have to raise a bridge. Never use the word bridge.
Yeah, Carlos, don't
Yeah.
seed A or seed B,
Yeah.
whatever.
Everybody knows whenever you
Extension.
any of those things, you're essentially
All right.
communicating, like, I did
Yeah.
not reach the goal, right? So
I'm
no,
struggling right now. Help me.
yeah.
Mm.
So I would aim for reaching your next milestone. So understand and then add a buffer. That's how much you should raise. Now, for the companies that are getting money thrown at them, and it's like, oh, instead of 3 million, I could raise 5 million. Obviously, I should raise more, right? More buffer. The problem is, let's say you raise 5 on 20. So 5 million on a $20 million valuation. Your next round, you at least need to double that. So you need to raise, 10 million on a $40 million valuation. So now work backwards and understand what milestones you have to hit to actually reach that.
Yeah.
And if you don't, that's a bad signal for the market, for investors. Your current investors aren't going to be happy, right? So it sounds awesome to raise more money, but then the milestones you have to hit are much, much.
And you've given away more of the company. If the company is worth 20 million and you can raise 2 and hit your target, you've given away 10% instead of 20. They say one of the reasons Mark Zuckerberg did so well with Facebook was because he was able to skip a few rounds of funding because he wasn't diluted so much.
Exactly.
Right. Instead of just always raising. And people were ready to give him so much money. They
Yep.
just didn't need it. And so they didn't take it.
The rule of thumb is that for every round, you're probably going to give away 15 to 20% of your company. So the more rounds you take,
You only
the more
get five
you fuck with.
rounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about, so our audience, they're indie builders, let's say someone has a SaaS application built on no code and it's making $10,000 a month MRR. Should this person seek investment or not? What would you say?
When is VC appropriate? When is
Yeah.
bootstrapping the way?
Yeah. So that depends again on, first, it depends on what you want to do with your life. So you need to like look within and talk to your family and understand what you want to do. Because once you get on the seed, once you get on the investment track, you know, if you only take, I'll use an example. So for ShareGrid. So ShareGrid, we only took a seed round and later decided we're not going to take, even though we had the metrics to raise a Series A, we blew through those metrics, had the opportunity to raise a Series A, we decided not to because we felt like the market didn't necessarily support it. So, and we couldn't prove out that we had a few attempts to try to expand the market and they didn't work out. Our business was solid, it was profitable from essentially year one, but we knew that if we took that money, we would take on a big risk that maybe that money could help us figure out how to get to, 100 million, $200 million in revenue. But if it didn't, we just gave away a bunch of our company. So we decided to iterate using our own money and see if we could scale in that direction. And at some point we said, no, we're just going to keep this and we're not going to take any more rounds. So you could take money up front. And as long as your investors are understanding, and ours were, you could get off the VC train. But most times you can't. And that's why I say, look within, is this what you want to do? Because having a profitable business could be an amazing lifestyle business owning, 90% of a business is much better than owning 8 or 9% of a business. So
Mhm.
start there. But let's say that, hey, no, because building a small company or a relatively medium-sized company takes the same energy as building a multi-billion-dollar company. It's the same amount of work, it's the same amount of hours, same amount of pain. There's no difference, right? Like Jeff Bezos, just because he had $1 trillion company, wasn't working much harder than the person running a restaurant. If anything, probably was working a little bit
Probably
less,
opposite at some
right?
point. Yeah.
So, okay, let's say you want to go for you want to shoot for the moon. Then I would say do a market analysis bottoms up. One of the mistakes I made when starting ShareGrid is I would look at industry reports. How big is the film industry? How big is the equipment rental industry? And I would like find these huge reports of 6 billion, seven
Yeah,
billion
everything's
dollars.
in the billions.
And
Every market
I
report has a billion.
you're like, look, it's huge, right?
Yeah.
I had no
And
understanding of what
all of it.
that.
Yeah.
So what I would recommend if I could go back, what I would do with ShareGrid, I would say, okay, how many rental houses in each city? Right. Go to Google Maps and just start counting rental houses. Okay, but we don't just do rental houses, we also help individuals. Okay, go to a directory, start counting cinematographers because we knew
Right.
that was our audience. Okay, we have tens of thousands of cinematographers. How much would you charge? And just multiply based on your fee, right? And you could do a few different variations. And if your number ends up being in the 50 to $100 million revenue at some point, right? It's really hard to nail this, but you have to get in that range. Then I would say, okay, you have a case to be made that this could be venture scale, and you might want to consider actually going out and fundraising.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I think people who are making this decision to bootstrap or fundraise will try to make the numbers work in whatever decision they've decided.
Yeah.
Some people will say, I want to raise VC. I want to raise venture capital. Let me go find evidence to support that case and not actually realistically check this, gut check this. Does this actually make sense?
Yeah.
No, there's no chance I'm going to sell $1 billion of Q-tip alternatives next week. Right? Like that's just yes, there are 2 billion ears that might need that. Yes,
Yeah.
like I can make the data say whatever I want.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard at this early stage to be honest with
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
And most of the time, I think, and you may, I'd love to hear your thoughts. The investor on the other side is not lying to themselves, right? They'll see right through what you've done in this math and go, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this line that you've taken doesn't make sense.
Yeah. No, our investors are the most cynical people in some cases, right? Like
Mhm.
98% of the time, our goal is to say no. Like we're coming in to say no.
Yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
have to. Like we can't spend, we're spending other people's money. And like we want to make sure that we're choosing the companies that have a huge market and have huge potential. So we will say no. In some cases, we're going to be wrong. A lot of cases, we're going to be wrong. So it doesn't
Right.
mean that like our opinion, if we say this market's small, a lot of people told Uber that the taxi market was too small. And they figured out that actually it wasn't because they were creating a new market by bringing on new drivers. So I wouldn't listen to investors all the time. Uh, but if a lot of them are telling you the same thing, you're
Yeah,
talking 30, 40 investors, and everybody seems to have the same reaction. Maybe there's something there and you need to stop and like, compose yourself and
really
uh,
analyze it.
yeah.
Yeah. One of the
And
things that I learned when I was raising money from angels is like, it's a numbers game. You can't just like meet with one person and say, I think I'm going to get it. Like it's a number. You got to meet with a lot of people. And it's not just, and like, if you do find that one person, you need to make sure that you're okay having them, bringing them into your company too, because you're going to be working together there. So you also need to be as selective as they're being selective with you. And so it's just, you need to get out there and be at a lot of pitches, meet a lot of people, and it takes so much time as
Yep.
you as a founder doing this. That's like 6 months of you just fundraising, going out there, and you're not even really working on your company that much because you got to dedicate this much time to it, right? And I just feel like the more money you're making, the more success you're going to have raising funds. And that's because investors can already see how you're making money. And okay, if I give you some money, you can just scale this now, right? But if you're not making money, it's going to be so hard for you to raise funds because no one can actually see your path to revenue. And so my advice to young entrepreneurs is just find a way to make revenue. Go out there and make as much money as you can yourself, because then you will have the option to say, do I want to just do this myself? Do I want to raise money? I now have the luxury to, you know, have a runway rather than I have no money, I have no revenue. VC is my only option, and this company's going to die without it. And that's literally, you can't build a company like that.
I totally agree. I was going to say that investors actually have, just to be on the investor side, we have a very tough job at the pre-seed level. We're making essentially the most irrational investments ever. Most investors have numbers to go off of. You have years, most bankers have years of data to analyze. At this stage where it's just the founder with an idea and you're trying to essentially bet millions of dollars on that founder and their idea, it's really tough to make a decision. So if you could bring more supporting evidence that, hey, this is working, I have users, they're sticking around, they're paying me money for this, that makes our decision a lot easier.
Yeah. Yeah.
100%.
$1 is more than 1 times better than $0. Right? Like, you're like, no, it's basically zero. Yes, but it's not. It's very different.
Look,
I think this audience needs to know, if you're an investor and you look at a company and the company P&L is great, but they're built on no code, is that a negative sign for you? Are you running out of the room? Do you still have confidence? Where are you at? Or where do you think the investors at large are at with this conversation?
it depends. So I've invested in a company that's built on no code this year, but I think it depends. And it comes down to,
Platform? Yeah.
it comes down to the,
Okay. Yeah.
NBA. Does
personally,
it rhyme with
Bubble.
humble?
So as much as I love no, and I love Bubble, I'm a huge Bubble lover. I the platform doesn't really matter, but I'll tell you. So I've been a designer all my life, and like I love no code because it gave me, I feel like superpowers. Like the ideas in my head, not just in Figma now. Like I could actually build them. It's so amazing. The issue when it comes to investment is that, in my in my opinion, there's only two ways to win at business, at startups. You have to be able to differentiate yourself. And I think there's only two ways to differentiate yourself. It's either tech or distribution. So either you're building something completely new that does not exist, right? Which means you're doing something really, really hard by building a new technology, right? We have a company in our current cohort. They're building technology to be able to deploy software from a computer to robots like 100 times faster. That's a new like workflow. That's a new way to do this tech that just doesn't exist, right? So there's just not that much competition out there. So they're going to be able to get customers because they're building a whole new way of doing things. Now, there's the distribution side. You could, as long as you could figure out distribution, you could use whatever platform you want. So the other company that we invested in that is a no code platform, we bet on the founder because she's building a social community for creators. She is a creator herself with like over 40,000 followers. She worked for TikTok. So she understands like the algorithm. She understands that whole world. She has investment from her bosses, her previous bosses. So she has that signal. So everything is built on a no code platform. In that case, I'm betting that she will figure out distribution better than everybody else. Because whenever you're building in no code, you're essentially building within a space that anyone could build that. So I'll give you another example. When, you know, in the early days of the internet, building a website and having payment on a website was really, really tough. You have to deal with hosting. You have to build your own payment provider. Now, as that friction came down, as it became easier to build websites, more people entered the market. So you just have a lot more competition. You have a lot more to compete against. And that's where distribution becomes key. So I hate that because just now I have the power to build anything I want. And it's like, oh, that's actually not the skill that you need now. You need the ability to like actually get out there and sell and distribute, because the market's so busy now for most ideas that that's how you differentiate yourself. The website itself is not a differentiator anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. I think those are really good, decision tree points of how am I really changing this product and market? Is it because of the technical advancement? I'm doing something that can't be done easily, or is it something that just needs more people to know about it faster? In the ads on top world, I come from this ad tech world. We recently sold our company. We were low code actually, so we were built with code in the innovation side of things, right? Like this programmatic ad server that did things in real time using this, like all these data and all this stuff. The the delivery, all of that was built in code. That was the innovation. But the boring stuff, lots of the UI that were just forms and buttons and statuses, that was actually built in Bubble. We built this low code environment so that all of the magic happened in code in this really controlled, self-built way. But the boring stuff, we said, okay, great. Let's not waste time, writing a React app when we
Yeah.
can just build it in Bubble quickly. And it worked really well. And it's an interesting part of that question as well.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of opportunity to use no code to still innovate and differentiate in industries where traditionally they've been left behind. I'll give you an example. In our current cohort, we have a company who, there's been a lot of talk about thin wrappers on top of AI. Right?
Right.
And it's like, you don't want to do that because anyone's able to knock you off and do a competitive product. But in some industries, it's just not that much competition. So this company is focusing on local government offices. And local government offices have just traditionally been bad at adopting technology. But he's a mayor of
Okay.
one of these local governments.
Just
Or
there.
he has the distribution. So even though his technology is not super impressive, he's using AI he's doing a lot of document ingestion and document discovery for these local governments. Very simple stuff if you were to like compare it to anything else on the market from a technical standpoint. But that industry has just traditionally been left behind and it's very
Mm.
hard to enter. So similar
Yeah.
to maybe the billboard world, there's probably hasn't been a lot of innovation on the tech side.
Right.
You come in and just build some really simple workflows, great user interfaces that just elevate that experience to the next level, and you can win
Yeah.
pretty nice.
Well, let me
Yeah.
ask you another question. You're a founder, you have a app that you built on no code and it's making 1 million ARR, right? And you want to raise and you're in the room and investors ask, what technology is it built on? What do you say to them?
What do I see? So they're making $1 million in ARR and they want to raise.
Yeah, probably like the pre-seed, right?
Sure. I mean, yeah,
A lot of money for a
All
pre-seed.
right, all right. So then a seed.
Good for
Sorry.
them.
it depends. So the more information I would need is how long did it take you to make that $1 million in ARR?
Yeah.
Have you been working at this for 7 years? What we really look for is momentum.
hmm
Right. So I don't really care about the numbers at this point. Like you mentioned, $1 is better than nothing. But what I'm really looking for is how fast are you moving? Right. So 3 months ago, you started a company, you already have 3 customers. That shows me you're moving super, super fast. Right.
hmm
Maybe those customers aren't even paying you yet. They're pilots. That's
Yep.
okay. Like you've gone out there, you've built something, you've built a demo, you went out there and found customers, you convinced them to sign on. That's great. I'm looking for momentum and I'm not really looking for numbers. The other thing I'm going to be looking for is the market. So is this big market? And every investor says that. I really don't care actually about a big market because what I care about is a fast growing market. So I need momentum within the market as well. And what I mean by that, there's an Jeff Bezos famously in the early 90s saw that the internet was growing at 2,300% year over year and was like, I just need to build something in that market. And he was completely right because most companies at the time that built e-commerce stores on the internet did pretty well. You don't have to be a genius to build something where the market is growing
Yeah.
so fast,
That's the
right?
word
There's a
for it.
famous saying of like, all tides lift all boats or something like that. And it's
A
completely
rising tide lifts all boats.
exactly, exactly. So I'm looking for, is this market growing? It's similar to our industry, JJ, for film, huge industry, right? Been around for over 100 years. It's not necessarily growing super fast.
Right.
Well, you're gonna be going against the grain in that industry, trying to grow anything in that industry.
Yeah.
But you should be looking for, is the industry growing year over year? Because even if the founder is not perfect, that will smooth out some of those
You'll get a
imperfections.
nice little
But
10%
all right,
bonus.
so let's
Go
say
ahead.
the answer is yes. They're in a growing market. They have 1 million ARR, and you ask them what technology they built on. Or your investors ask you as the founder what technology you built on. Do you say you built on no code? Do you say that you're built on, a JavaScript stack, essentially whatever Bubble's built on? How do you respond to that?
I mean, look, personally, I don't care. I think different investors will have different mindsets on this. To me, what would matter is, again, do you have
Everything
distribution,
else.
do you-
Yeah.
everything else,
Yeah.
and then is this scalable, right? So, like,
Yeah.
I would want to see, like, can you show me some examples of other apps that are at this scale or actually much bigger scale, a couple years down the road, where you will be, and will this platform support it? So is there any risk? I'm looking for risk. I'm looking to identify risk. So is there any risk that, you know, bubble goes away? Is there any risk that whatever platform is is going to be around for a while? And then the problem is pricing, right? Like, are they going to change their pricing and then your margin are gonna like come down? So there, there is some risk that I would have to identify. Can you
Mhm.
code and leave? And that's
Mhm.
what we did at ShareGrid is that, like, we started with ShareTrack code, which they used to make their
Sure.
code open source and you could just take it and fork off and do your own thing. That's
Yeah.
great because we control our destiny. But as you see, like, it's hard to build your technology on somebody else's platform and play by their rules. A lot of companies have learned this the hard way. Look at Spotify building on top of Apple, right? Like, Apple could just charge whatever they want. They could change the rules. They could come out with a competing service. A lot of people learned that lesson with OpenAI building on top of them. So that's the big risk that I would have to feel comfortable with, is that, like, what happens if the platform goes away or changes their settings or they have an outage, you know, and this is the risk with even no code platforms, right? Like, there's serverless different platforms now, and there's all these tools. So you kind of have to identify that a little bit, but that comes more towards due diligence in my case.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I think you know, in my world, our company was first fully built with code, right? Everything engineer driven, even the front end was built with, we'd have outages as well. Someone pushed something like crash production and things happen. And then we switched to Bubble. And then this was like 5 years ago when we switched, they had lots of outages. But the one thing that was different was, like, at least when we were in control of the code, we knew when we pushed something and what to do to fix it. When Bubble went down, who do I call? Like, there's no one, no one to scold. Well, not that I'm
Yeah.
yelling at everyone,
Yeah.
but like, you can't. There's no triage for me to go, hey, let's not do that again. Right? We
Yeah.
can't improve our processes. We're beholden to them, which is risky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ideally, we be in a world where, look, I think over the next several years, no code will take over and more because with the help of AI, things you imagine should be able to be automatically coded, right? But hopefully you're still in control of the code and you still have access to it. So if you do grow to a large size, again, the challenge with building on top of somebody else's platform is that when the business is really large, an outage is costing you a lot of money. And you
Mhm.
just don't want that to be out of your control. You want to be in control of
Right.
the mistakes. You want to own the mistakes and fix them, like you said. So it's just hard when you're relying on somebody else to fix the outage because it's not their problem, right? Like, I mean, I'm sure they're losing money too, but like not as much as probably you're losing if you're a transaction based business or something like.
Yeah, and we would lose demos because the outage would happen right at the beginning of a demo, and then all of a sudden something
Yeah,
would go wrong. And so I'd always have like screenshots and videos ready just in case I couldn't click properly. I was always prepared. We were fortunate that, because the main processes of our business were running in the background, regardless of the no-code system, and it was
yeah,
highly redundant, and it was always on, and it was,
yeah,
99.59, uptime. We could protect ourselves, even if the UI was inaccessible. Yeah, sure, you could change the ad, but something was
yeah,
running. And we could always change it as well separately. Like we had our own path that if we
yeah,
needed it, we could. And so, yeah, it was nice. But the flip side is the speed, right? Being able to push features on a moment's notice or on a demo, right? I've done this before where I'm demoing a product for a client. They're working on something. I notice something's wrong and I just, turn to the side and fix it. Hey, can you refresh your page? And magically it works.
yeah,
That is like, especially early days, like,
yeah,
we heard last week, lots of MVPs are being built on Node.
of
In
course.
that MVP stage, the speed
Yeah.
is so important and so helpful. It's like its own feature.
And we say the most competitive advantage a startup has is speed
Mhm,
against like any big, large incumbent is speed. So I think in the early days, no code makes a lot of sense. But
mhm.
then as you grow bigger and bigger, then the risks of that we mentioned that we just covered potentially outweigh the benefits of going fast. But that's only once you're like a very large company.
Yeah. That's why I love and I'm working on a project now that's low code, where on a moment's notice, we hire a front end developer and everything can now be coded, even though the speed in this like really malleable early stages, we can move way faster
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
get what the product looks like needs to do so much faster than if we were to try code everything. And so then at that moment, when we hit the scale, when we have the revenue, and we can hire the developers and we're not worried about like every little penny,
Yeah.
then we can go, hey, let's go back to full stack and make a
Yeah.
lot of sense after
Yeah,
that.
but I think no code just gives you that speed and versatility to
Mhm.
get to market quick, see
Yep.
what works, adjust, make those adjustments, find that product market fit. And then it's like, okay, let's really hammer in now. And then what makes sense for growth and scale now. I think a lot of no code platforms keep on getting more powerful and more powerful. So I think depending on the use case, it depends on do you need to go somewhere else or not? I think with each
Mhm.
day, we can stay on these platforms longer and longer, depending on your use case. So I don't know where it's gonna go. I think we're gonna continue to get more power. We'll continue to get more AI into this, which allows us to access more things. I guess, Marius, as we work to wrap up here, like where do you see no code and AI going in the next couple of years? Like generally, I guess.
Yeah. No, I think you bring up a great point that as these platforms get more and more advanced, much more mature, right? We could trust them better because we have a track record to look back on of how many times did they go down. I would even question everything we just talked about is that what's the difference between Twilio going down or AWS going down? You're not in full control. I mean, you're using so many different services that you're relying on your website to run. So how is it different than no code, right? And again, I think until now it's been because a lot of these platforms have been fairly new. So the trust wasn't there. But as they get more mature, I think we will get to a point where people will stay on these platforms longer and longer and build more and more complex features. And again, what you said, JJ, like with AI, I mean, I tweeted about this. I was stuck in bubble and I took a screenshot of when I was stuck on in all the different errors I was getting. And OpenAI walked me step by step on how to fix it.
Uh,
That was just I had this like moment of like, that's been probably one of the first times when I've seen AI besides like copywriting and stuff of like really be by my side and help me do something that I was not going to be able to figure out. And I can't imagine once you actually build that into the no code platform where you're just describing what you want and it builds the workflow or builds the database for you. I mean, again, I use this, I use this saying all the time, which is one of my favorite things. I repeat it a lot.
Mm.
So I really do think right now we're in the medieval times of the internet. What I mean
Mhm.
by that I think there's a metric out there that only 0.5% of the world's population could actually code. But most of us are on the internet. Most of us are consuming and we live in the digital world. But think about that. Only 0.5% could actually change that digital environment and make changes and share our ideas. That's the equivalent of saying, hey, there's all these books out there, but only 0.5% of us could actually write books. So if you think about it that way, um, when people say like, "Oh, what's going to happen to all the jobs?" It's like, no. Again, only 0.5% of us could actually contribute to this digital world that we all live in. And with no code, that's going to increase to 20, 30, 40%. So the idea is are going to be there's going to be so much better ideas out there, so many more things to do in the digital world that it's just people have never been able to express. So imagine a doctor that, right now is spending their time probably hiring people to do manual work for them. What if that doctor could just build their own workflow and build their own
Yep.
tool just by describing what that tool should be? There's so many great minds out there that literally can't write. They just don't have the ability to write right now. So that's why I do think we live in medieval times of the digital world.
Yeah, very similar to the movie industry with like, we had film cameras and then we had digital cameras and then we had phones, right? And then all of a sudden, all these videos and films and stories could be told because people of any age or whatever could pick up their phone and capture something and tell the story. And it
And then
created
the
this
AI
renaissance
editing of
of
it.
writing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
The
it's
effect, all that other stuff too.
and everything, and it's just creating more and more, and now content is king, you can never have enough of it, and it's just like, so many people of all walks of life are now contributing, and it's creating this really rich ecosystem that's created a ton of new opportunities elsewhere, and I think no code has kinda given us a little bit of that, of putting technology into the hands of the everyday person,
Yep.
and now they can create technology and create more things, and it's gonna be all this coming together, and I think it could be really special.
I am so excited about the future, and I'm just like grateful that I live in this time and age, right? Of like I get to see the world develop at such a rapid pace now, and I'm super pumped to be here.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Marius, thank you so much for coming on our podcast today. We really appreciate you. We will put information of maybe how people can contact you or learn more about Techstars, the program, in the description of this podcast. But otherwise, thank you again for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you guys. Really appreciate it.
Cool. That was a fantastic interview with Marius. Super lucky to have him on the podcast. Again, if you guys haven't taken a second to rate and review the podcast, please do. It goes a long way in helping us reach more people and get this word out, and it allows us to get bigger and better guests to do more things for you all. So please share it to your friends, rate and review it on Apple Podcasts,
Mhm.
Spotify. Check us out on YouTube, subscribe there. Otherwise, David, it was great having you back this week. And David,
Glad
you know what we say,
next
David.
we'll see you next week in no
We
code.
will see you all next
Adios.
week in No Code. Adios.